Sebastian Richiano. So Sebastian is from CONICET in Puerto Madryn, Patagonia. And he has been a collaborator on the grant, and he recently became, so big round of applause, INCWA Vice President. So recently, I mean, not so recently, like 1 year ago, but recently, relatively recently. So he's going to tell us about the last interglacial in Argentina, which is one of the best places I've been to. So,
thank you, Ale, for the presentation. Good morning to everyone. I will talk about this topic, but the last interglacial in Argentina will be discussed in different talks today. So I will concentrate on major environmental changes since last interglacial in southwestern Atlantic, using the fossil record in Patagonia, and also in a poster tomorrow maybe, concerning ichnology, and all the data analysis concerning the past sea level will be discussed this afternoon in the talks by Carla and Deirdre. So, as mentioned, I will talk about marine quaternary deposits in Patagonia, especially the molluscan content and the trace fossils developed on it, the regional and local patterns of these fossils, and at the end we will try to discuss the climate and oceanographical aspects that influence these patterns and how useful are they to interpret path changes. So, but first I want to mention the long collaboration between the Italian and the Argentinian colleagues since 2009, when we met first time with Marta and some colleagues of PISA. In 2015, we received for the first time Ale when he studied the Paleocene. In 2019, the first field trip of this project, the Warm Coast. In 2022, we received Carla for her PhD, and in 2023, I was here working with them as an INCWA fellow. Some generalities just to start. The deposits of the late Quaternary in Argentina are really, really extensive. They're from the Rio de la Plata in the north of Buenos Aires province to Tierra del Fuego in the southernmost of Patagonia. They are very well distributed with variable preservation. Obviously, the Pleistocene in some places are not so well preserved. Difficulty access, especially in some places where there are no roads, no private farms, and in some places it's quite difficult. Concerning the paleontological aspects with higher taphonomic loss. The Holocene is also really extensive, better preservation and better chronological control. That is very important for some discussions. I will show you just as an example the quaternary deposits in the Chubut province, which is in the center of Patagonia. They are in blue. In 4 localities from north to south: Puerto Lobos, Bahía Vera, Camarones, and Bahía Bustamante. In Puerto Lobos, here's an old paper published in '82, but we have very new information from the PhD of Carla. Sorry, I haven't so in red lines there are the Pleistocene ridges, and in blue the Holocene ridges. In general, very well distributed, parallel to the modern beach. In this case, below is a quarry. We work a lot on quarries and natural cuts of the deposit. If not, it's really difficult to reach the deposit, which in general are the mixture between pebbles, sand, and shells in different proportions in every place. This is Cabo Raso locality in the center of the province. When you can see here is a geomorphological map of Rivalini and others. In orange are the Pleistocene deposits, in blue the Holocene deposits, and again these are the typical working in quarries. Camarones, which is one of the most notorious localities, a long time visited for many researchers from different countries around the world. We can divide it in two. In northern Camarones, this is a geomorphological map made by Sanqueta, showing in orange the Pleistocene deposits, and in light orange and yellow the Holocene deposits. So here is the transect. You can see here the quarry, then the Holocene and some Holocene deposits attached to the Pleistocene. In southern part of Camarones, we have again, this is a map from Sherman and Radke in 2007. Again, they dated a lot of these ridges and generate a geomorphological map with the distribution of different interglacials and different ridges of Holocene, all attached to the Pleistocene. The ages is a really hard topic in Patagonia. We have a lot of deposits. Not all are very well dated. We have a good number of dating in the PhD of Carla in the last 3 years. During the work on project, we have made a lot of ages in these localities. Again, a picture of some of the quarries with the shells in this case. For Bustamante is another famous locality with a lot of dating in these two. Camarones and Bustamante are maybe the two places with better geochronological constraint, made also by Sherman and Radke. This is a picture of the quarry of the Pleistocene. In general, most of these shell ridges are constituted in the same way by a core of massive pebbles and sand, and then a stratified upper part of the ridge that depends of the part of the ridge we are observing in the quarry. So we have a lot of Pleistocene, late Pleistocene deposits, mid-Holocene, and the modern beach through Patagonia and also the Buenos Aires province. And what we do in general is observe the patterns of the biological content and in these three ages and latitudinally. So I will start with the fossil content in general. This in the general view results that the mollusks are the dominant fossils. So 80 or 90% of the fossil content in these ridges are mollusks. We have a typical community for the Patagonian coastal area and the Bonaerensian coastal area. We made a database with all the modern Holocene and Pleistocene fossils, and we describe the patterns, which is here describing, also includes some localities in Brazil, Uruguay, and other places, but we will concern just the Patagonian localities. The modern distribution of the patterns is quite similar to the Holocene. This is the species richness of in this case, is bivalves. The gastropods is the same. But the Pleistocene is very, very different here, the pattern. It's not like in the Holocene and the modern. At old ages, the molluscan biodiversity decreased southward, which is quite expected, as in general the biodiversity decreased to the poles. Using some statistical method, we can describe better these two main associations, where we have here a Patagonian cluster and Bonaerensian and northern South American areas, very, very separated one to each other. But if you see, it's difficult here, this locality here, called San Antonio Oeste, is in the middle between Patagonia and Bonaerensian area. The position of this locality is important because it's different in different moments of the history. And also there are some cluster of localities here, places with these dashed lines, that in every running of the statistical program, in every new graphic, some localities stay always together. This is a clear picture of some of the examples. You have here from left to the right, the modern Holocene and Pleistocene, and this is San Antonio Este, which is here with the red circle. Look at the position of the San Antonio Este locality is in just at the top, northern of Patagonia, before to enter in Buenos Aires province. And in modern and in Holocene, this locality is separated from those groups, from Patagonia and from Buenos Aires province distribution of diversity. But during the Pleistocene, it's in the middle of Patagonia. This is the two biodiversity patterns from the Pleistocene respecting to the Holocene and modern are more close, and this locality, which is the window of both groups, is into Patagonia, so shows a more unified position of the biodiversity. In this case, we use isotopic composition of one shell, which we call Prototaca antiqua. Maybe Carla used another name, but it's a logical problem. What we do is, in 288 shells, study the isotopic composition of the shells from north to south in all the Patagonian localities, from San Antonio Este to Tierra del Fuego. And in this graphic, you can see from north to south the data from modern, Holocene, and Pleistocene. But it's very clear that the distribution of the data is similar, very similar to the modern and Holocene shells, and very different to the Pleistocene ones. This is a pattern of distribution from north to south to the carbon stable isotope. Also, considering the fossil record of, in this case, one particular gastropod, which the name is Teulaatra, Teulatra is a gastropod, this black one here, this one. It's very common in Patagonia, and for a long time we always use it informally as a biostratigraphical descriptor for the Pleistocene deposits. If we found Teulatra, we say, okay, this is the Pleistocene. After that, we start to make a review of the distribution of the family of this gastropod worldwide, and it's a typical modern gastropod in Chile. Here is the type locality of the species. All the green dots are the modern deposits, and the orange are the Pleistocene deposits. So it's really interesting that this gastropod lived during the Pleistocene in Patagonia, in the Atlantic coast, and not living anymore, now living just in the Pacific coast in Chile. So the next step was to make a statistical morphometric analysis with all the families from different parts, not just from Chile and Argentina, also from using museum collections of different parts of the world. And what we discovered is that the modern shells in Chile and the Pleistocene shells in the Atlantic coast of Patagonia show no statistical differences, so it's the same species. In this paper, it's quite extensive. We show that the drastic and rapid change in different factors occur after or in the Pleistocene-Holocene transition, and this caused the local extinction or the displacement of this species from the Atlantic coast of Patagonia to the Pacific coast of Patagonia. And there is a relationship with the macroalgae because another interesting thing is that the distribution of the family of this molluscan shell is related to the currents in the Pacific and the distribution of the macroalgae, especially one species of this macroalgae which acts as a floating for raft. It's proved that some samples, some shells of this mollusk have raft from New Zealand to the Patagonian coast in Chile, attached to this macroalgae. So it's possible that this floating mechanism was used from Patagonia to the Atlantic to enter into the Pacific, but something happened after the Pleistocene-Holocene transition that this connection was cut. The ethnology of these shells, trace fossils represent the activity of different organisms in the substrate where they live. Bioerosion traces, in the case I will show you, are the marks made by organisms on a hard substrate. In many cases, reflect the presence in the fossil record of organisms that having hard parts like annelids and others. And it's very important to reconstruct the benthic communities. In this case, we use another gastropod, which is Tegula, which is very abundant in the quaternary of Patagonia, but also, which is important, using one taxon, we limit the controlling factors on bioerosion. It's not the same to compare traces made on mollusks that lives attached in the intertidal setting that a bivalve that lives maybe 10 centimeters below the sediment-water interface. And what is more important for us is not to the names of the traces, which is more ethnological part, we are concerned about the producers. So we separate the traces made by bryozoans, annelids, other mollusks, sponges, brachiopods. These are the main bioeroders in Quaternary. So again, we made some patterns from north to south, in Pleistocene, Holocene, and Modern with different localities. And the first idea is that the diversity of trifossil, which is the number of different ignotaxa in one particular locality, increase southward, contrary to the molluscan biodiversity. This case is the intensity of erosion, which is the number of shells are bioeroded. And there is an increase in the number of bioeroded shells also southwards. As a general idea of the ignological patterns, we saw that there is an increase in the ignodiversity and bioerosion intensity to the south. Most of the bioerosion structures are made by bryozoans. These bryozoans are active in highly productive waters, cold waters. So we interpret a colder scenario to the south during the Pleistocene. This is a new case of the bryozoans. It's similar to the Tegula atra. We found in this locality, which is in northern Camarones, is MIS5. We found a lot of bryozoans everywhere, in the pebbles, in the shells. So we talked with a specialist in Argentina, a biologist of bryozoans, sent some samples, pictures, and after a couple of days, he called me and said, no, this is not possible. These bryozoans don't live in Argentina, lives in the Pacific, in Chile. I said, no, okay. I sent the paper of Tegula atra and said, no, it's the same. The present distribution of these bryozoans is in the Pacific coast and not in the Atlantic coast. And this is not published, but it's quite new. But it's amazing, beautiful, the bryozoan colonies. So, the patterns I show, the molluscan patterns, the information with the geochemistry of the shells, the examples of, for example, Tegula atra, the bryozoans, or the ignodiversity patterns, shows that there is a clear distinction between what happened in late Pleistocene, very different to the patterns observed in the Holocene and in the Modern, and also from north to south latitudinally. So what we do in general is to analyze the modern conditions to then back to the time and try to interpret what changed in the mid-Holocene or Pleistocene deposits concerning all of these variables. All of these are from modern or Western Atlantic, the currents, the salinity, the temperature, the productivity, the ocean or fronts, different kind of fronts that act in the sea, the substrate. For example, for ignology, we saw a latitudinal variation which increased the ignodiversity and the intensity of bioerosion to the south. And most of the traces are made by bryozoans, which are more abundant in cold waters and high productivity zones related to coastal fronts. So if we observe again this distribution of the ignology, we observe that if just putting off the traces made by tenostomate bryozoans, we can justify the differences between the Pleistocene and Holocene in northern Patagonia to the modern and to the southern locality. So what we observe is a change in the ichnological patterns just for the absence of one bryozoan group. And one possible cause of this is the movement of the confluential zone. Here, I put here in front of Buenos Aires, this part is the zone where the hot waters from the Brazilian current that flow southward and the cold waters, the subantarctic branch that flow northward in Patagonia, meet here in the confluence zone, in front of Buenos Aires province. And from different sources of evidence, including some drilling projects in the Argentinian basin, there is information that this zone, this confluence zone, moves latitudinally to the south, which generates that the Brazilian current, warm waters, reach the northern Patagonian area in one moment, and this displacement to the present position occurs between the late Pleistocene and the Holocene. So what this generates is colder waters in northern Patagonia and not in the rest. The rest of Patagonia, the southern Patagonia, sorry, I have to do this, the southern Patagonia here was always under the effect of subantarctic waters, at least since late Pleistocene, where we have data. But also in the local patterns, remember I tell you that there are here some clusters of localities that always stay together in different models. I will show you what happened with the ichnology of two examples in San Jorge Gulf and Puerto Lobos locality. The San Jorge Gulf is here in central Patagonia. These are the localities of Camarones and Bahía Bustamante. And this part is the southern Gulf of San Jorge with all other different places here, the two maps. Again, we saw the ichnology, the ichnological patterns with the two same variables, diversity of trace fossils and intensity of bioerosion. And if we take just the intensity of bioerosion, we observe that in the northern part of the Gulf, we have, during the Pleistocene, this curve, the northern part, the blue, and the southern part of the Gulf, the red. During the Pleistocene, it's more or less the same intensity of erosion in both places of the Gulf. There are no too much changes. In general, the tendency, a decrease in the intensity to the Holocene and an increase in the modern is the same for both areas, but the decrease in the intensity is higher southward. It's too much different. This difference is not possible to be just for the time. So if we observe the modern distribution of fronts and currents in this area, we have that there are two close areas in this modern paper that depends of the oceanographic conditions into the Gulf that creates an area of high productivity and lower temperature in the southern part of the Gulf as a consequence of the one front that comes from Chile and enter in the southern part of Patagonia. So the bioerosion pattern in the modern and in the Holocene are dominated by this pattern of oceanic currents, but the Pleistocene not. The other example of local pattern is in Puerto Lobos, which is in the north of Patagonia, another gulf, San Matias Gulf. In this case, we have Pleistocene and Holocene ridges. Recent, we saw the ignology and the diversity patterns. In this case, you can see that the distribution of the diversity pattern is quite different between the upper two, which are Pleistocene, and the lower two, which are modern and Holocene. And again, if we saw what happened at present, we have that the winds that enter into the Gulf cause two different currents into the Gulf, and one of the currents creates an upwelling zone in the southern part of the Gulf. Here we can see in blue the cold water, and in the southern part of the Gulf, the red area with high productivity. This is made by an upwelling from the outer shelf to the Gulf, created just by the winds that reach the Patagonia at this moment. We consider that these upwelling events were already active since the Holocene, but maybe they are not present during the Pleistocene, because are very different the situation between the Pleistocene and the Holocene and modern. So, as a summary of all of this information, the marine quaternary deposit shows excellent preservation and rich molluscan fauna preserved on these shelves. Highly diverse trace fossil content can be observed. There are latitudinal changes in the molluscan, chemical, bioerosional pattern register, which could be explained mainly by oceanographic or environmental factors. In local oceanographical conditions can generate clusters into Patagonia and control the patterns. But the most important aspect is that after last interglacial, remarkable biotic changes are noted as response to environmental oceanographical changes in the southwestern Atlantic. This acts like a puzzle. We have to first try to interpret local patterns, then regional patterns in different ages and different localities to try to understand what happened after last interglacial that changed in the environment, and so many things have changed in the fossil record and other aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you very much for this nice overview. Before handing over to questions, I want to stress one thing. So Sebastian here today is also in representation, I think, of all the wonderful field collaborators we had, not only in Argentina, but also in Brazil. There are some of our collaborators in Brazil, but the talk Sebastian gave, I think it shows you how much knowledge it is down there in all the places we went. Yeah, thank you for showing just a little bit of it, because I know you can stay with days with Seba in the field speaking about the first and last name of every shell that is down there. So questions for Seba.